can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be physical, spiritual. There are a lot of ways that trauma shows up.
Welcome everybody to the Conquered for Me podcast. Joining us today is Amy.
Hello.
Know Amy a little more. So what are you going to school? You're going to school for trauma therapy. Where are you studying?
I'm studying at Metropolitan State University of Denver, Colorado.
Woo, okay. And she is actually going to a program, the trauma therapy, that is the first.
It's the first. It's a brand new program. I'm one of the first students to be going through the program. And I've had amazing opportunities such as studying abroad in Scotland, where we got to study mental health, addiction, and youth violence, and the trauma that is incurred and occurs through all of those experiences.
Awesome. So she is alumni peer support specialist, yoga instructor, and future trauma therapist. And today we are going to be getting into trauma and trauma therapy. We're just going to dive right in real quick, defining trauma and the realities of it and how it impacts people's lives.
Trauma is different for everybody. It's an event that takes place, and depending on how the people receive it or process it, depending on how they self-regulate, their coping skills, whether they have them or do not have them, will then lead to how they interpret them and process them, and that leads to reactions when future events happen.
Right. So when you said regulate, that is something that goes all the way back to childhood. Because we are not born to know how to regulate. That is something that is supposed to be taught. And so if we grow up in an environment that's very dysregulated, we, in essence, don't know really how to respond to trauma or even really notice what trauma is. And it's different for everybody.
Yes.
When we think of trauma impacting people's lives, when did you understand, or when did you even know what trauma was?
That's a really interesting question. Looking back on my life, I experienced a lot of trauma growing up, and I just want to touch on that briefly, only because, parents can't teach what they don't know.
Right.
And so we have this generational trauma occurring.
Yes.
And it's important to then, someone who has experienced trauma, to teach my children at a young age how to have better coping skills. When I started noticing trauma was pretty early on. I was emancipated by the age of 15. So my trauma began before that with the woman who gave birth to me. And she was not trauma informed or, had layers and layers and layers of trauma herself. So as a 16-year-old mother that she was, that was her first trauma. And my trauma really began in the womb.
Right.
Because she was so traumatized and didn't know how to handle being pregnant and didn't really understand it. So my trauma really began from the get-go.
Trauma is developed in the womb, and that is 100% true. That trauma is something that affects people differently, and it's just a matter of time when people want to accept it.
And I think it's important to have the conversation.
Yes.
To not normalize trauma, because generally speaking, trauma isn't normal, but actually in society today and in the world we live in and in the families oftentimes that we're grown up through, trauma is normal. A lot of crazy things out there happening in the world, and people have become so desensitized to the traumatic events that they're not even aware and or acknowledging how traumatic these events are. And so I think it's really important to just have the conversation.
Yes.
And kind of bring awareness to trauma and let people know that it's okay. It's okay to have had trauma, and it's okay to want to learn how to grow through that and heal from it.
Yes, I love that. It is okay to have had trauma or have trauma. If you have experienced trauma, that gives so much opportunity to grow. So what inspires you in life and what motivates you?
That's changed over the years. So today what motivates me is a personal self-growth and reflection of all the things that I've been through and really using them to benefit myself and not be drowning by them anymore. Because I was drowning for years. decades. And so now I have the opportunity to really take my lived experience and turn that around in a way that my deficits have become assets.
Yes. Hear that? Like, deficits become assets. Like, I think that's gonna be your slogan.
Yeah, right?
I really like that. Like, that just really hit home with me. I would have to take this back, and you said generational curses. And amen for you breaking those chains. It takes a lot to break generational curses. And anyone who's listening in the audience who knows what we're talking about, let's just get like a hoorah, because for real, it is tough. It is tough. It's not an overnight thing, but it is in sight. It sometimes can look far away, but it is there. So if you have experienced trauma, or if you don't know that you're experiencing trauma, or you want to grow, this is where you need to be. It is a conversation to be had, and that's why we're having it today. And I want to thank you all for listening and tuning in. This is our first, well, one of our first runs. So we appreciate anyone who follows from this. Really have these conversations about trauma informed, like, you don't, and
It's almost taboo.
yeah, it is almost taboo. So if we just want to repeat that real quick, what is trauma?
Trauma is an event that occurs, and it depends on how the person interprets it, and therefore how they process it, digest it, and react to the world.
What do you do to keep your cup overflowing, or like your cup full, and exercises you do to manage that stress?
I do a few things. I do breathing exercises. Certainly as a yoga instructor also, I like to do some of those stretches. It's very calming and healing when I'm just on my mat and it's just me and my mat. And I don't have to worry about the world going on around me. It's not a competition, right? And along with that is the breath work is very integral in yoga and one of the key pieces to it. I do a lot of prayer work as well. And that's not to say that I'm hugely religious, nor do I, preach on to others what they need to believe. It's just that I believe in a higher power greater than myself. Because if there's a higher power and I'm it, we're all in trouble.
Right.
Right? So there's something there's a bit larger force at work than myself. And so for me, that's really what I tap into. Is just that higher force, and it's just something that helps me, guides me, and allows me, when I have a gut feeling, that's my higher power saying hello. And when I don't listen to that, I'm in trouble. When I do listen to that, things tend to, it doesn't mean struggles don't happen, right? That's a part of life, but it just, things tend to flow more smoothly. And when I'm on my path, things kind of fall into place. So that's how I know I'm doing all the right things for myself in healing and growing. Some other things that I do are, I've just recently started working out, which feels really nice because for me, as I'm aging, I want to age as gracefully as possible. And I was noticing some weaknesses in my just getting around, and I didn't want that. I have little children, and so I need to keep up with them and want to keep up with them. So.
Well, you look great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I say to myself that, Betty White.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Love her. Love Betty.
I wanna be like Betty White.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And I think that there's a lot with healing that preserves
Absolutely.
and it slows down the process
Absolutely.
of aging.
Stress.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Stress
100%.
is the number one, thing. Depression, anxiety come with trauma, and when those go unchecked or unhealed, or the growth doesn't happen, then that definitely happens in the body.
Yep. Yeah. So up here, definitely will reflect here as well.
Absolutely.
And I would just want to touch on that breath work. So I've been seeing a lot of things on breath work as well, and I've been really interested into it. Also because when I used to go to Seeking Safety group, when I was trying to heal, when I was healing, the therapist told me, let's breathe, like let's practice breathing, and I was like, fucking breathe, I'm breathing right now, but she really said, we did a demonstration, and she's like, no, we're gonna actually breathe, into our to our diaphragm, and I didn't realize till that moment that we do not breathe like how we normally should, right? We take, like, we're in a hurry and then we're getting things done and we're hyper focused, and we really don't. And taking that breath, just for me, was a lot of practice, like, because then I would remember in my triggers that I had to take those breaths, and that I was safe, I am here, and I'm present and stuff. I would just have to practice my things, and it helped because our hearts are, when we're breathing, are like going a mile a minute, and that speeds up our age too, like our
Absolutely, and most people do
blood
shallow
pressure.
breathing,
Yeah.
so they do what's called upper chest breathing, and it stops right about here. When I can,
Here, let's do it all together real quick. So,
and really get that down to the diaphragm is designed to breathe.
yeah.
So when we're not exercising the diaphragm, then, and only exercising the lungs, that also creates physical side effects.
If you're experiencing any type of stress right now, definitely look into breath work. I would also recommend some EFT tapping. I won't go too much into that because I'm still learning about that, but that helps with anxiety. But as far as trauma, and what she was saying works for her, and she has a lot of wisdom, and she's going to be a future trauma therapist that I can't wait to, we're going to celebrate for her.
Yes, absolutely.
I am so excited for her. Follow us along on this journey because this is only the beginning. Trauma is often considered one of the biggest causes of mental health disorders. Could you explain the link between trauma and mental health, and how trauma therapy plays a role in addressing mental health crisis that we're experiencing? And so a therapist who is not knowing the trauma, like, education base, and is trying to help somebody who is going through trauma and doesn't really have a depressive disorder, what's gonna, like, can you explain a little bit there what's gonna happen or what could happen?
Yeah, mental health is the ability to process information in a healthy fashion, which then affects how I think, feel, speak, react, and show up in the world.
Yeah.
So trauma-specific therapy is addressing the traumas in a way that is compassionate, empathetic, loving, caring, kind, so that people can really feel safe when I'm holding space with them,
Yes.
to be vulnerable and be willing to talk about some of the tough stuff. And it can be a slow process, for sure. It's not something that people want to rush through.
Right.
It's kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, and in the grief work that I have done, I'll peel back layers of that onion, and then I'm good for a while.
Right.
And then unexpectedly more grief will come up
Right.
from the traumas that I've experienced. And so then it's just having compassion with myself and
Exactly.
willingness to be vulnerable with other people. I too have a therapist, and so then it's peeling back more layers and then being good with that for a little while, and then peeling back more layers. So it's definitely not a process that, it took years for this
Right.
trauma to impact me in a way that I have CPTSD. That's in remission mostly,
Right.
but it's through a lot of hard work and diligent willingness to just want something different than what I was giving myself before.
Oh, that is amazing. I love hearing all that. Pouring into my soul right now. Like when you said your CPTSD is in remission, also someone who struggles with CPTSD who has recently come over some barriers said her CPTSD is in remission. It's not something that you can cure with a prescription. It's not something a quick fix it can cure it. Like she said, it's a lifeline of traumas. You gotta walk in your growth. Like you're not going to all of a sudden start doing yoga and be like, oh, I'm better. This is gonna take years. You're not gonna start doing something and then all of a sudden be healed right away. Said her grief work, other things like onions. Anyone who's going through any grief, anyone who's going through any trauma, anyone situation going on, and they're thinking that the prescription pills aren't working and they're doing everything wrong and just they're not meant to be like where they're at because everything's going wrong for them. That's not at all. It's more so you're like an onion right now, and you're peeling back some layers. Some individuals may be reluctant to pursue traditional therapy, but still want to heal from their trauma. In your experience, what alternatives or approaches can be helpful for people who are reluctant to engage in therapy? Other alternatives, if you want to heal from trauma, like what else besides therapy?
There are a plethora of therapies out there. I will be integrating yoga into my therapy.
Yes.
Talk therapy by itself statistically takes much longer than some of the other therapy modalities, such as EMDR.
Yes.
Or yoga therapy, sometimes even massage therapy. There's all kinds of therapies out there that are different than just talk therapy. Again, talk therapy is kind of old school, it's kind of traditional.
Right.
There's sound therapy, music therapy. You know, the challenge with any kind of therapy is a deep desire to make the changes necessary to have the life that I deserve.
Yes, wow, that shit hit hard. That is, if you are looking into therapy and you thinking that your therapy is not working, like, here, say that again.
So any type of therapy, any kind of healing or growth requires a deep desire to make the changes necessary to have the life that I deserve.
Yeah, that is very true. So when you are ready, or if you are ready, remember that right there. The life you deserve. You deserve a life that's healing and growth. Breaking generational chains and cycles is hard, as is so hard. It's in sight, and it may seem like it's farther and farther at times, but it is in sight, and it doesn't happen overnight. But that is what she said, key, hitting home, life you deserve.
And it's never too late. People are
Yes.
never too old.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what age you are.
Yes.
You can always, always, always choose something different.
Yes,
with support, of course, because
Right.
just choosing something different sounds very cliche. Oh, well, I can just make different choices.
Right.
But it's not that easy.
No.
When people are steeped in trauma and they're steeped in all the effects and the symptoms of trauma, it's not just like a light switch that you can turn on and off. It
Right.
takes dedicated hard work and trust in the person that you're working with in whatever modality that you choose.
Yes, 100%. So, and going in that, like, wherever anybody who's listening in the audience, like, wherever you are right now, if you are like, I gotta make this choice, like, this choice is for me, and you're on it, don't feel hesitant in trying different outlets. Because I would have to say, I've gone through multiple therapists. Don't have too much pushback just because one strategy didn't work. It was that intense, it was that crappy, and you didn't deserve it. So now you deserve the life that you have to work for. And it's worth all the work at the end of the day.
100%.
Yeah, it's worth all the work at the end of the day. So in trauma, we have all these experiences and we're trying to learn how to regulate and cope and understand what it is. So how do we get our cup to be full? Like, overflow into others. Like your cup. Like, how do you keep your cup, like, besides just working out, exercising, like, when you start to feel your cup coming down, like, what do you do?
There are a lot of things I do for self-care.
Yeah.
It's as simple as going for a walk,
Yes.
drinking a glass of water.
Yes. If you are not drinking enough water, your body will start to cramp.
Yes.
You will start to feel overwhelmed.
Headaches.
Yes, headaches. So if you are not, if you're in your checklist of Maslow's hierarchy and you feel like you're not meeting some of those, that could be a huge sign to why it's a lot harder for you to kind of process this trauma, or like you wanting to be on this choice of healing from your trauma, because you have to meet those. Like, you have to. Basic life needs. And you need, though, the skills, right? Like, if you don't have the skills to really understand how to provide shelter for yourself, to provide income, to provide the food and the clothes and all that, it's very, very tough to work on that trauma. So taking a step back, let's check off those Maslow's hierarchy, and if you are in a situation, let's make sure that you got those covered.
Start from the ground up.
Yes, because when I was in therapy trying to figure out, like, oh, like, she was depressed or this and that, but I was living in an environment that was unsafe, that was toxic and dysregulated, and I was doing this therapy and trying to do all the things. It was insanity.
Or because
Because
you're
I
living in
couldn't-
fight or flight.
Yeah, So when you are living in fight or flight or freeze or fawn, and you're trying to do the work and you're out of that for a moment in the work and then you come back, you're putting yourself in a more detrimental situation. Because then you're perceiving that what you're doing, because you're not ready yet, what you're doing is not working, so it's pushing you back even further.
Creating those extra layers
Yes.
of trauma that then we have to peel
Yes.
more layers of the onion later.
Yes. So sometimes you can be in a safe environment, you feel unsafe. It's also because of that trauma that you're not processing.
Absolutely.
So just to determine the two, to look at the reality. Okay, what are the facts? Like, where am I? Am I present, or am I rethinking of things that have happened in the past? So
Being present, you brought up a really great point there. Yeah. Being present is huge.
Yes.
If I'm caught up in the past or future tripping,
tripping,
and I'm not present in the moment, then my mind, when left to its own devices,
yes,
without practicing all my self-care tools,
yes,
can run amok, and then I'm convincing myself of things that
catastrophizing. Yes.
Absolutely. And then next thing you know, I am a blubbering mess, and I don't know my, head from my feet, and it's just I'm disoriented and discombobulated, and so it's really important to just remember that it's a process. It's a process, and there's layers, but it's okay, and safety is huge.
Yes, safety is huge. So, speaking about trauma, it is a very intense topic. It's a touchy topic. I know some people will be like, I've heard this before. Like, reality is, in a place that we live today, we have never lived more in a place where people are scared. We are living in a time where people are more scared than ever. And it is disabling. And it's sad, because our trauma should not be disabling. Grow into the life we deserve, right? And that's to say, like, grow your garden of life. It's a seed that has some deep roots, but you can always replant new seeds and rip out roots, and that's just the thing that I always think of. Like, I always think of, like, my garden of life, and I've had a garden of trauma, but I want a garden of life.
And in my garden, am I watering the weeds, or am I watering the flowers?
Right.
It's my choice to be.
Yes. Are you watering the weeds or the flowers? Because at the end of the day, you are contributing to your environment. So if you are in an environment where you are around people who are fighting all the time, or in this dysfunction and dysregulation of not even believing in trauma, or not believing in healing, and comfortable where they are, comfortable in their misery, you're not gonna get anywhere. Like, and I'll say that from experience. And Amy will tell you that too.
Absolutely. And
you can't be around people who want to push you down and manipulate you. Things that bother me the most is when I've heard is, oh, that's your excuse. Trauma isn't real. Or trauma, that is this and this is that because you have trauma, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? That is somebody who probably either has a lot of trauma. Like, what else?
Generally, those are people who have unhealed trauma, unresolved issues themselves. And so it's really hard for them to hear or experience or listen to someone else's trauma, because it really triggers them. Yes. And therefore they are now in reactionary mode.
Okay, see, from the future trauma therapist, she said it better. And she is really passionate about this. And like she said, she's going to integrate yoga in her therapy when she gets her license. Right now we are at an all-time high. It's proven we're at an all-time high of homelessness, and right now is more than ever to be having these conversations.
Because there's so much unhealed trauma and unresolved issues out there in the world, people turn to things like drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping, whatever addiction feeds that hole in their soul at the time. And so, which leads oftentimes to homelessness.
Yes.
Because we're making, people are making decisions that they would not normally make if they had healed themselves and grown from it and created the life that they deserve. So it's definitely important to be having the conversation about trauma, how to be informed about it, what to do about it, and finding the strength inside and the courage to say, I matter, and I want something different for myself.
And so going further in, what are some common signs or symptoms that someone who experiences as a result of trauma?
Well, it can be as simple as just reacting to a minor situation. It can be as major as depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, low self-worth. Those were all the things that I experienced as a result of the trauma throughout my life.
Right.
Not taking care of themselves, not taking showers, not meeting those basic needs. And because everyone is so different, it shows up in people differently. But generally speaking, those are some of the common denominators.
How does individuals recognize and address these signs in themselves or realize others that are now taking projections on to them? And what would you recommend that, like, someone who is trying to heal from their own trauma, who is now having projections from somebody that is, not wanting to heal, or, that they realize that, oh, this person does have trauma and they're like, where do we start? What happens? Like, what do you recommend?
What I have learned is that from the age of birth to about 18 to 21, when you're actually an adult, whatever, the traumatic situations that happen to you by an offender perhaps, or something really hostile or really awful that can happen, are not your fault. Like,
right.
Things that happen to us when we're babies, when we're children, are not our fault.
Right.
But oftentimes we carry that into adulthood, and if we haven't processed that and healed through that, then we start to react to the world, and then we want to blame everybody else and not take responsibility for then when I'm 21, when I'm 18, 19, 20, and I'm getting to that age where my brain is fully developing, I am now making choices that lead me into situations, putting me into more trauma.
Yeah.
But oftentimes the normal thing to do is to blame everyone else and say, well, if they didn't do that, then I wouldn't have done this, or if they would have shown up like this, then I would have shown up like that.
Right.
That's really not how it works. It's not taking accountability for myself and for how I want to show up in the world. So I think it's really important for me, in my own experience, to take responsibility.
Yes.
While I may not like the things that are happening around me, I also have made the choice to put myself in those situations.
Yes.
Therefore, I choose not to blame other people anymore, because I've really come to the realization and determination that I put myself in those situations, as crappy and as shitty as they were at times.
Right.
I was the common denominator in the various situations.
Right.
It wasn't all these other people. They may have had their own common denominator situation happening for themselves that brought us together, but trauma feeds off trauma, right? So trauma can. So if I'm traumatized, I'm going to go find someone else who's traumatized, so that we can be sick together, so to speak.
Yeah, that sounds so messed up, but that is so true.
So that, because when someone reflects back to me things that I haven't healed in myself, then I'm going to project onto them what I don't like about that, because really it's what I don't like about myself.
Ooh, that was a lot. You taking all that in?
Yeah.
That was a lot. That was a lot. That is so huge. I mean, I can resonate with so much of that, and like that's just speaking into me right now. What I say is, anyone that is having projections brought onto them, and you're kind of in this headspace where you're like torn between a rock and a hard spot, right? Like you feel like you're hitting your head on a rock, and then the other one you're trying to like pull, like
there's a rock on this side and a wall on that side.
And give yourself grace.
Yes.
You are not responsible to heal anyone else. You are not meant to be a therapist unless you actually have your license and that's what you want to do, As for me and Amy too, like we're peer support specialists. But one thing that I have taken away from this experience is that I cannot, like, we can take the person to water, we can show them all the things, but we cannot make them drink, and we cannot live in their sobriety.
Can't want it more for them than they want it for themselves.
Yes. So just remember that. Give yourself grace. and not, that's a really hard pill to swallow, what she said, accountability and responsibility. And this is actually kind of going into a book I'm writing, Victim to Victor. That's that victim to victor mentality where you need self-discipline too. You need self-discipline to understand that this is you. This is all you. And so just remember that, but also give yourself grace. How can we raise more awareness as a powerful solution for healing in this trauma therapy? Are there any specific tips or initiatives that can be taken to increase public understanding and acceptance?
I think the big thing is talking about it.
Yes.
When I was in Scotland, one of the things that I asked them is, how are you neutralizing the stigma around mental health, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, any addiction, youth violence, domestic violence? How are you neutralizing the stigma? And the response that I got was, talk about it.
Yeah.
We go out into the community, we have events, we bring awareness to the community, and we give people the opportunity and the space to be vulnerable, to see that it's okay to talk about it, to understand that it's something that needs to be talked about, needs to be shared, needs to be made more so a topic of discussion.
Right.
We just need to be having conversations about it and talking about it within our family units and talking about it with our children in a age appropriate way.
Yes.
And just really being able to bring it to the surface rather than burying it like so many people have done, and as society and as just generally speaking.
Yes.
We don't talk about trauma. We don't. That's a
Yeah.
no-no.
Yeah.
When in reality, we've all been through some form of trauma in one fashion or another.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I have talked about this topic to some people who, like you said, don't want to even hear about it, or don't believe they have trauma, or don't even believe in trauma, and that it's just something made up. Have something inside them that makes them feel that they're not worth not being able to heal or not understanding at all. So, man, this has been a great topic to dive into. I know it was like a lot. It's really complex. But this is just one of them. So wrapping up here, looking ahead, what are your goals in your ongoing studies and your professional journey? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 6 years in relation to your trauma therapy or like its impact on others? Like where do you want to be in 5 to 6 years?
For me, I think if I can it's kind of like the butterfly effect. If I can help one person, that one person is going to help 2 people.
Yes.
And those 2 people are going to help 4 people. And those 4 people are going to help 8 people. And then all of a sudden it's blossoming out. And it's kind of this ripple effect.
Yes.
So for me, it's not, and that little bit of help, which is huge,
yeah,
is what changes the world. We together, healing and growing,
right,
and helping each other,
the ripple effect,
is
yes,
going to help create a world that I believe is possible. I think the more we talk about it and the more we address it and the more we make it okay to talk about and create that safety for people to talk about, or other modalities, of course, then that's important to me.
Oh, you want to have your practice?
I would love to have a practice. I would love to have kind of a wellness center.
Yes.
Where it's body, mind, and spirit.
Yes.
And it's a well-rounded approach to all things.
Yes.
And not just one piece of the pie. I
Right.
want the whole pie.
I love that. I love your aspirations and goals. And so, after looking ahead and wrapping up further, can you please share a quote or a piece of advice that really encapsulates the importance of your studies in trauma therapy and the work you want to do and the potential for your healing and growth?
For me, I believe that in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Be the kind of person you deserve to be.
Yes.
For yourself. And therefore, the world around you will feel it too.
Yes. You hear that? So let's say it together. In a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Be the kind of person that you deserve and that the world deserves too.
Amen. Woo! I love that. I think we're going to put that on some merchandise and get Amy rocking here. I appreciate everybody tuning in to The Conquered for Me and Lisa's Reality with Amy here.
Yes,
we are peer support specialists. She is future trauma therapist. I am guidance coach and mom. She's a mom as well.
Mom, yes.
Yeah, and we both have a lot of lived experiences, and we're going to be moving forward in this. This was our first take on everything. I appreciate all the views or comments or anything. You can like and subscribe down below. And thank you again, and tune in for our next one.